Hello everyone and welcome to this channel. If you are new here, my name is Kaylee. I'm an online reseller. I go to thrift stores, I pick up used clothing, stuff that nobody wants, and I buy it for cheap and I sell it on sites like eBay and Poshmark. In today's video, we are going to be talking about a pretty important topic during this time of the year, and that is how to transition to spring. As a clothing reseller, I always want to stay one season ahead, and if you're new to reselling, I would recommend adopting this kind of tactic early on in your reselling career. If you always stay one season ahead and list items for the next season now, you will always be one step ahead of the game, and people tend to buy 4 seasons early. So for instance, right now we are in late January and we're in the middle of winter. So while people are still picking up colder weather items, over the next several weeks, people are going to start looking at spring items, which means you need to have those spring items into your closet or in your eBay store now. I've mentioned this a couple times during my thrift hauls, and I've been getting a lot of questions from you guys asking how to know what to pick up for spring, or what kind of items are spring items versus summer items, because they're kind of the same thing. And what I will say is that although spring and summer are very similar as far as fashion goes, I do think that spring is somewhat more of a transitional period between winter and between summer. And so it is a transitional period where people are basically in the middle of cold and warm weather. And so picking up transitional pieces is what I normally think of. So in general, when it comes to spring items, I tend to think of rain gear. It rains a lot during the spring. Moving into summer, people are going to need rain gear. Although January is a really popular time for athletic wear because of New Year's resolutions, spring athletic wear is really popular as well, because that's when it starts to get warm and people can start doing things outside. So I highly recommend picking up athletic wear to prepare for spring. Speaking of going outside, hiking is typically started during the spring as well, so I always look for hiking outdoorsy kind of gear. People also tend to do spring cleaning and doing house renovations and things outside, starting to plant, and so they are going to need utility kind of workwear pieces for spring. And besides that, and as far as generic spring fashion goes, I usually tend to focus on jeans. You can look for things like ankle jeans. Those seem to be really popular during that time of the year. Again, that transition period between cold and warm, ankle jeans are a perfect medium. I like to look for sandals or shoes that are a little less clunky than some of the winter ones that I've been picking up. I also really like to look for kimonos. I find that kimonos are really great transitional pieces because you can throw them on or off, and they're pretty effortless. And then just thinking ahead for some holidays or events that happen in spring, we've got St. Patty's Day. I don't usually prepare for that. I don't like buying a bunch of green items just because, but you might want to prepare to filter through all of your green items and maybe put that in your description to pull it up. Easter happens during the spring, and I typically think of really bright colored dresses. Pastels and things like that tend to be popular during this time of the year. And then I don't know how many people will be going to this event this year, but prom dresses are typically something people shop for in the spring. And so if you don't buy prom dresses all year, maybe you would consider doing that in the spring. Again, right now we're currently in the middle of a pandemic, and I think probably only half, if not less, of high school students are going to prom this year. So I highly doubt that'll be super popular this year, but wanted to throw it out there for anybody that might be watching this in the future. So those are kind of some general things that I look for and things that I think about to prepare for spring. Now, each year I also try to do a little bit of research into that year's trends moving into each season that we're going into. I by no means am a fashion expert, but I don't think that you have to be in order to get ahead of the trends. So basically all I do is I go onto Google and I type in 2021 spring fashion. And then you can do that for each season that you're trying to look up. Again, we're trying to stay ahead, so I'm doing this in January. And then when we are in spring, I'll be looking up summer trends for 2021. So I just basically go onto Google. You'll notice that some of the first websites that pop up are what most people look for in fashion. So there's Marie Claire, there's Vogue, and a couple other websites that I know a lot of people really look to for fashion inspiration. So what I normally do is I go through each of these articles and I try to find anything that is mentioned more than once on different websites. If it's mentioned more than once, I usually consider that a pretty popular fashion trend, and these brands do a lot more research than we do, and so I'm trusting their judgment. They spend millions of dollars figuring out what's going to be popular as far as fashion goes. Guesswork is really done for me. All I have to do is look for repeating patterns. So I've gathered some today after I read through a few of those articles, ones that I find pretty trustworthy as far as spotting trends go. And I wrote down a few that I thought I would share with you today. So all of these, like I said, had been mentioned on different various resources, and I only pulled the ones that I saw show up multiple times. So for spring 2021, trench coats are going to be super popular, mainly tan khaki ones. Speaking of khaki, I noticed a big correlation with lighter colored khaki items, not just trench coats, but also pants and tops as well. The lighter colored khaki and a monochromatic look seems to be pretty in. And then just in general, lighter shades of white. I'm kind of thinking of the minimalist login look that is still trending. Lighter colored items seem to be doing pretty well, different shades of white. Florals. Florals was mentioned on pretty much every article that I read. And I mean, we typically think of florals for spring anyways, but there's going to be a heavy focus on florals this year. So anything all over floral would typically add value for spring. And besides florals, tie-dyes. Tie-dyes have been trendy for the past few months, but moving into spring, where I think it'd be more appropriate to wear those brighter colors, tie-dye is going to be super in again, and I would definitely look for anything tie-dye. Maybe you might even want to do your own DIY tie-dye at home. I saw a repeating pattern of oversized pants. Anything that was super wide leg or super flare leg or even super baggy pants seemed to be really trendy this year. Which makes sense because the next trend that I saw was showing midriff and wearing like bralettes and lingerie and things, which would contrast and pair well with a super baggy pant. So I think I've mentioned this like lingerie look before. It's basically where people wear lingerie as a top and it's exposed rather than being hidden. I really like this trend. I think it's really pretty. I think if done right, worn under a blazer, can look really amazing. Bralettes were definitely a big topic in a lot of the articles that I've read. And like I said, lingerie looks that kind of makes sense paired with a baggy pant. So exposing the middle part of your stomach seemed to be a big trend, and along with that was the cutout trend. So anything with little cutouts here and there, particularly in tops, but sometimes in dresses and pants too, where a little bit of skin is exposed. And if you do find something like that, cut out is a great term to put in your title and into your descriptions. And then lastly, I saw a lot of romantic and flowy themed styles, really girly types of colors and really flowy long materials, particularly in maxi dresses. I forgot to mention that in the beginning of this video, but dresses are another thing that I look for spring. Alright guys, so I hope that I've given you a little bit of insight into some 2021 spring trends that you can look for this year, as well as some things in general that I really look for to prepare for spring. As I mentioned before, it's really important to stay ahead of each season. So right now, while we're in winter, you really want to be thinking about what you're going to pick up for spring and start picking up some of those items while you're at the thrift store and start decreasing the amount of heavy coats and winter items that you're picking up. The worst thing you can probably do right now is buy a ton of coats and a ton of sweaters, because there's a very short window now of when those items can sell, and you're going to end up sitting on them until next year. So really work on transitioning out of a season a month or two ahead. And if you've got any coats or heavy items in back stock right now, definitely would get those listed, get them in front of people as soon as possible, because again, that window is closing. If you've noticed any 2021 spring trends as you've been reading through, drop a comment down below and let us know so we can help each other out. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.